Admiral Kane Harrison stood in the command center of the Terran Defense Station, watching the massive screen that showed the dark emptiness of space. The coffee in his cup had gone cold hours ago, but he didn't notice. His eyes were fixed on the strange readings that had appeared on their sensors 3 days ago. "Sir, we're getting those weird signals again," said Lieutenant Susan Brooks from her station. Her voice carried worry that she tried to hide. The young officer had been tracking unusual energy patterns for the past week, and they were getting stronger. Kane walked over to her console and looked at the data. The numbers didn't make sense. Whatever was out there was moving faster than anything humans had ever built. It was also big, very big. "How many objects are we tracking?" Kane asked. 12, sir. All of them are huge. Each one is at least 3 times the size of our biggest space station. Susan's fingers moved quickly across her keyboard as she pulled up more information. "They're coming from outside our solar system, and they're heading straight for Earth, on the other side of the galaxy." Supreme Commander Vex 9 of the Zephyrian Empire reviewed the reports about the small blue planet. The data showed a world that had developed nuclear weapons and space travel in less than a century. This was impossible according to everything the Zephyrians knew about how civilizations grew. "This species is dangerous," Vex 9 told his council. His voice was cold and mechanical, like all Zephyrians. "They advance too quickly. They could become a threat to our empire if we let them continue." The council members agreed. In their long history, the Zephyrians had conquered 47 worlds. They had a simple method that always worked. Send a scout fleet to study the enemy. Show them how powerful the Zephyrian Empire was. Give them a chance to surrender. If they refused, destroy them completely. "Send Fleet Admiral Keth 7, Vex 9 commanded. 12 ships should be enough to handle these primitive creatures." On Earth, Dr. Paul Martinez was working late in his laboratory on the moon. The lunar research station was quiet at this hour, with most of the staff asleep. Paul preferred working alone when he was studying gravity patterns in space. Tonight, he had discovered something that made his hands shake. "This can't be right," he whispered to himself as he checked his calculations for the 3rd time. The gravity readings showed massive objects moving through space in perfect formation. Whatever they were following the laws of physics that humans didn't understand. Paul picked up his communication device and called Earth. "Control, this is Dr. Martinez at Lunar Station. I need to speak with Admiral Harrison immediately." "Sir, it's 2 in the morning, came the sleepy reply. From the communication officer? "I don't care what time it is. Wake him up. We have a problem." Fleet Admiral Keth 7 stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominator. Around him, 11 other massive warships moved through space like deadly shadows. Each ship carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon. The Zephyrian fleet had never failed in their mission. "How long until we reach the target system?" Keth 7 asked his navigation officer. 2 more days, Admiral." The primitive species calls their system Sol and their planet Earth. Keth 7 looked at the tactical display showing Earth's defenses. The humans had a few small space stations and some basic weapons. It would be like crushing an insect with a hammer. Too easy, perhaps, but the Empire's orders were clear. "Prepare the standard ultimatum message," he commanded. "We will give them the usual 72 hours to surrender. After that, we destroy everything." Captain Lisa Grant was enjoying her morning coffee when the alarm started screaming throughout. Earth Defense Station Omega. She ran to the command center, still wearing her pajamas under her uniform jacket.
"What's happening?"
she demanded. "Ma'am, we've got visual contact with the unknown objects," reported Communications Officer Jake Turner. His face was pale as he pointed at the main screen. "You need to see this." The screen showed 12 massive ships that seemed to eat the light around them. They were unlike anything in human design, with smooth curves and surfaces that seemed to shift and change as they moved. Each ship was the size of a small city, and they moved with the grace of hunting sharks. "My God," Lisa whispered. "There. Beautiful and terrifying at the same time." Jake's console beeped with an incoming message. "Ma'am, they're trying to communicate with us. Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers was cold and emotionless. It spoke in perfect English, then repeated the same message in 16 other languages. including some that humans had never heard before. People of Earth, you will surrender immediately to the Zephyrian Empire. You have 72 hours to decide. Surrender, and you will be allowed to live as slaves. Resist, and you will be destroyed completely. This is your only warning. The message ended, leaving the command center in complete silence. Lisa felt her heart pounding in her chest. She had trained for many things, but not for this. Get Mia. Direct line to President Carter, she ordered, and wake up everyone in the Defense Council. We're going to need all the help we can get. President Helen Carter sat at the head of the emergency meeting table. Around her were the most important people in Earth's government and military. The room was filled with tension as everyone tried to understand what they were facing. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, President Carter said slowly. Alien ships have appeared in our solar system. They want us to surrender and become slaves. If we refuse, they'll destroy all human life on Earth. That's correct, Madam President, confirmed General Roy Patterson, the head of Earth's military forces. Our best estimates show that each of their ships has more firepower than our entire space fleet combined. Secretary of State Nancy Phillips leaned forward. Have we tried to negotiate with them? Maybe we can find a peaceful solution. I don't think they're interested in negotiation, said Admiral Harrison, who had joined the meeting by video link. Their message was pretty clear. Surrender or die. Or those are our only options. No, President Carter said firmly. Those are the options they gave us. That doesn't mean those are the only options we have. She stood up and walked to the window that looked out over the city. The people were going about their normal lives, not knowing that their world was about to change forever. How much time do we have? She asked. 72 hours from when they sent the message, Admiral Harrison replied. That gives us about 65 hours left. Then we have 65 hours to figure out how to save the human race, President Carter said. I want every scientist, every engineer, every military officer working on this problem. We're not going to surrender to anyone. Far above Earth, Fleet Admiral Ketsevan waited for the humans' response. In his experience, most species took less than 24 hours to surrender once they saw the power of the Zephyrian fleet. The humans were taking longer, but that was not unusual for primitive civilizations. Fear often made them slow to think clearly. Admiral, we're detecting increased activity on the planet, reported his sensor officer. They appear to be mobilizing their military forces. Cat 7 was mildly surprised. Interesting. Most species simply panic at this point. These humans seem to have some courage, at least. Should we demonstrate our power, sir? Destroy one of their space stations as a warning? Not yet. Let them think they have a chance. It will make their eventual surrender more satisfying. Keth 7 turned back to his display screens. Besides, I want to see what these creatures do when they're desperate. It might be entertaining. Clock was ticking, and both sides were preparing for what was to come. The Zephyrians were confident in their superior technology and long history of conquest. The humans were scared, but determined not to give up without a fight. Neither side knew that this encounter would change both of their civilizations forever. Fleet Admiral Keth 7 moved his ships into attack formation around Earth. The 12 massive vessels positioned themselves like a net, ready to catch anything that tried to escape the planet. This was the standard intimidation pattern that had worked on every world the Zephyrians had conquered. And begin broadcasting the ultimatum on all human frequencies, Keth 7 ordered. Make sure every person on that planet hears our message. The message was simple and terrifying. It played on every radio, every television, every communication device on Earth. The cold voice spoke in dozens of languages, but the words were always the same. Submit to Zephyrian rule or face complete destruction in cities around the world. People stopped what they were doing and listened. Some panicked and ran through the streets. Others stood frozen in shock. Many began to pray. But in the government buildings and military bases, people were working frantically to find a way to fight back. President Carter called an emergency session of the Global Defense Council. Leaders from every nation joined the meeting through secure video links. The room was filled with fear, but also with determination. We have 58 hours left, President Carter announced. What are our options? General Patterson stood up and activated a holographic display. Our satellites had been studying the alien ships. They're huge, heavily armed in their technology. It's far beyond anything we have. A direct military attack would be suicide. What about negotiation? Asked Prime Minister Chen from China. Maybe we can find some middle ground. I've been analyzing their communications, said Dr. Martinez, who had been flown in from the moon base. These aliens don't seem interested in compromise. They've done this before, many times. They have a system that works for them. Secretary Phillips leaned forward. What kind of system? They show up, demand surrender, and if the planet refuses, they destroy everything. Simple and effective. Dr. Martinez pulled up data on his tablet. I've been studying their ship movements. They're following patterns that suggest this is routine for them. President Carter felt a chill run down her spine. How many worlds do you think they've conquered? Based on their confidence and the way they operate, I'd guess dozens. Maybe. Hundreds. Dr. Martinez looked around the room. We might be the first species they've encountered that has nuclear weapons. But I don't think that will make much difference. While the politicians debated, Commander Danny Walsh was preparing for the most dangerous mission of his life. Stealth frigate New Dawn was humanity's most advanced spacecraft, equipped with experimental cloaking technology that had never been tested in real combat. Are you sure about this, sir? Asked Lieutenant Carol Bennett, his pilot. If they detect us, we're dead. If we don't get close enough to study their ships, we're all dead anyway, Danny replied. Besides, someone has to find out what we're up against. The New Dawn launched from the hidden military base on the dark side of the moon. Carol piloted. The ship using minimal power, drifting through space like a piece of debris. The cloaking system bent light around the ship, making it nearly invisible to most sensors, as they approached the alien fleet. Danny and Carol got their first close look at Zephyrian technology. The ships were even more impressive up close. Their hulls seemed to absorb light, and energy patterns flowed across their surfaces like living things. Look at those weapons, Carol whispered. Each gun is the size of our entire ship. Danny was studying the ship's defensive systems. Carol, do you see anything strange about their shields? What do you mean? They're designed to stop energy weapons and high-speed projectiles. But look at the frequency patterns. They're not set up to deal with anything moving slowly or anything that's not metal. Carol looked at the data on her screen. You're right. It's like they've never fought anyone who used different tactics. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Dr. Amy Foster was working around the clock in her laboratory. As humanity's leading expert on alien technology, she had been given access to every piece of information about the Zephyrian ships. This is fascinating, she told her assistant engineer Rick Barnes. Their technology is incredibly advanced, but it's also very specialized. What do you mean? Rick asked. They're built to fight other spacefaring civilizations with similar technology. Energy shields, plasma weapons, faster than light travel. But they seem to have blind spots. Amy pulled up a holographic display of the alien ships. Look at this. Their sensors are designed to detect metal, energy signatures, and fast-moving objects. But they might not notice something that's moving slowly or made of materials they're not programmed to recognize. Rick studied the data. Are you thinking what I think you're thinking? We can't fight them with better technology because we don't have better technology. But maybe we can fight them with different technology. Things they've never seen before. Admiral Ketsivan was growing impatient. It had been 36 hours since the ultimatum was delivered, and the humans still hadn't responded with a surrender. This was unusual, but not unprecedented. Some species took longer to accept reality than others. Admiral, we're detecting increased activity on the planet's surface, reported his sensor officer. They appear to be moving military equipment and evacuating civilian populations. Predictable, Keth Seven said with something that might have been amusement. They're preparing for war. How quaint. His tactical officer looked up from his console. Sir, should we demonstrate our power? Destroy one of their space stations as a warning? Keth Seven considered this. The standard procedure was to show overwhelming force to break the enemy's will to fight. But something about these humans intrigued him. They were reacting differently than other species had. Not yet, he decided. Let's see what they do first. I want to understand how these creatures think. Back on Earth, President Carter was meeting with her top military advisors. The mood in the room was grim, but determined. "We have 22 hours left," she announced. "What progress have we made?" General Patterson activated a display showing Earth's military preparations. "We've moved our space fleet into defensive positions. We're not strong enough to win, but we can make them pay a price for victory." "What about Dr. Foster's research?" asked Admiral Harrison through the video link. "She's discovered some interesting things about their technology," General Patterson replied. "It seems the aliens are designed to fight enemies similar to themselves. They might not be prepared for unconventional tactics." President Carter leaned forward. "What kind of unconventional tactics?" "Dr. Foster thinks we should use weapons they won't expect. Things that move slowly, materials they don't recognize, attacks that don't follow normal military patterns." "Sounds desperate," said Secretary Phillips. "How we are desperate," President Carter replied. "But sometimes desperate people do things that surprise everyone, including themselves." Dr. Foster was in her laboratory, working with a team of engineers and scientists. They had been awake for 2 days straight, but nobody was willing to stop working. "The computer virus is ready," announced Dr. Linda Hayes, the team's cybersecurity expert. "It's designed to exploit the way their systems process information." "Will it work?" asked Rick Barnes. "Their computers are incredibly advanced, but they think in very logical, predictable patterns. This virus introduces chaos and randomness, should confuse their systems." Amy looked at the collection of strange weapons they had created. Kinetic projectiles that moved too slowly to trigger automated defenses. Electromagnetic pulse devices built from modified car parts. Computer viruses hidden in children's toys? "This is either brilliant or completely insane," she said. "Maybe both," Rick replied. "But it's the best chance we have." Commander Walsh and Lieutenant Bennett returned from their reconnaissance mission. With valuable intelligence, the alien ships were powerful, but followed rigid patterns. Their weapons were designed for specific types of targets. Most importantly, they seemed to lack creativity in their tactical thinking. "They're like a very advanced chess computer," Danny explained to the military briefing. "It's incredibly good at what they're designed to do, but unable to adapt when the rules change." "So we changed the rules," said General Patterson. "Exactly. We don't fight them the way they expect to be fought. We do everything wrong, at least according to their understanding of warfare." With 18 hours remaining, President Carter made the decision that would determine humanity's fate. Earth would not surrender. They would fight using every weapon they had, and some they were still inventing. "Send a message to the alien fleet," she ordered. "Tell them our answer is no." The message was broadcast on all frequencies, short and simple. "This is President Carter of Earth. We reject your ultimatum. We will not surrender. We will not become your slaves. If you want our world, you'll have to take it, Fleet Admiral." Keth 7 received the message with mild surprise. In his long career, only 3 species had refused to surrender. All 3 had been completely destroyed within hours. "Very well," he said calmly. "If they choose death over slavery, we will accommodate them. Begin attack preparations." But as the Zephyrian fleet prepared for what they expected to be an easy victory, they had no idea that humanity was about to teach them a lesson about the difference between superior technology and superior thinking. The countdown had begun, and both sides were ready for war. The first human ships launched from Earth just as the sun was rising over the Pacific Ocean. They looked nothing like the sleek military vessels that most civilizations used for space combat. Instead, they were a strange collection of modified cargo ships, civilian transports, and experimental craft that had been hastily converted for war. Colonel Steve Murphy watched the launch from the command center, deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. As head of Special Operations Command, he had helped design the battle plan that everyone hoped would save humanity. It was the craziest strategy ever attempted in the history of warfare. Asked his second in command. "Major Tony Russell?" "No," Steve replied honestly. "But fighting them the normal way would definitely fail. At least this gives us a chance." The plan was simple in concept, but difficult to execute. Instead of trying to match the aliens' superior technology, humanity would use tactics that the Zephyrians had never encountered. They would fight like humans, not like the advanced civilizations that the aliens were used to conquering. Dr. Linda Hayes stood in her laboratory, putting the finishing touches on her most important creation. The computer virus looked harmless. Enough stored on a device that resembled a child's toy, but it contained code that could potentially cripple the alien fleet's computer systems. Remember, she told the technician who would carry it into battle, you have to get this directly into their main computer core. It won't work if you just transmit it from outside. How am I supposed to do that? The technician asked nervously. Very carefully, Linda replied, and with a lot of luck, Captain Greg Nelson climbed into the cockpit of his modified cargo ship, the Fighting Spirit. Around him, hundreds of other pilots were doing the same thing. Most of them were not military personnel. They were commercial pilots, retired officers, and volunteers who had never fired a weapon in space before. "This is insane," muttered his co-pilot, Maria Santos. "We're flying cargo ships against alien warships." "That's exactly why it might work," Greg replied as he started the engines. "They'll never expect it." The first wave of human ships approached the Zephyrian fleet at full speed. They were loaded with conventional weapons and followed standard attack patterns. Fleet Admiral Keth 7 watched them approach with something like disappointment. "Is this the best they can do?" he asked his tactical officer. "These attacks are pathetic." "Shall we destroy them, Admiral?" "Of course. Show them what real weapons can do." The Zephyrian ships opened fire with devastating effect. Beams of energy that could melt mountains tore through the human vessels like paper. Within minutes, the entire first wave was destroyed. Not a single alien ship had even been damaged. "That was easier than I expected," Kef 7 said. "Prepare to bombard their planet. We'll start with their military installations." But as the alien ships prepared for planetary bombardment, their sensors detected something strange. Thousands of small objects were approaching from different directions. They were moving slowly and appeared to be made of materials that the Zephyrian computers didn't recognize. "What are those things?" asked the sensor officer. "Debris from the destroyed ships," Ket 7 replied dismissively. "Ignore them and focus." On the planet, this was exactly what the humans had hoped for. The second wave of their attack consisted of modified civilian spacecraft that had been designed to look like space junk. They moved slowly and were built from materials that wouldn't trigger the aliens. Automated defense systems. Lieutenant Amy Clark piloted one of these strange vessels, a modified cargo hauler that looked like it was falling apart. In reality, it was carefully designed to appear harmless while carrying Dr. Hayes' computer virus directly to the alien flagship. "I can't believe I'm doing this," Amy whispered to herself as she drifted toward the massive Zephyrian ship. Her vessel was so small compared to the alien craft that she felt like an ant approaching a skyscraper. The Zephyrian sensors detected her ship but classified it as harmless debris. Their computers were programmed to ignore slow-moving objects that didn't match known weapon signatures. Amy's cargo hauler fit in either category. She managed to dock with the alien ship's outer hull and began cutting through the metal with tools that looked like they belonged in a construction site rather than a space battle. The alien's sophisticated. Sensors never detected her because they weren't programmed to look for someone using a simple cutting torch. Meanwhile, Commander Bill Roberts was leading a squadron of modified civilian ships in an attack that defied every rule of space combat. Instead of trying to fight the aliens' superior weapons, they were using tactics that made no sense from a military perspective. Remember, he told his pilots, "We're not trying to win a fair fight. We're trying to confuse them so badly that they can't figure out what we're doing." The ship scattered in all directions, some pretending to retreat while others spun in circles. A few pilots even began broadcasting music on military frequencies. To the Zephyrians, it looked like the humans had gone completely insane. "What are they doing?" asked Keth 7's tactical officer. "I have no idea," the Admiral replied. "Their movements make no tactical sense. Are they trying to confuse us?" "It's working, sir. Our targeting computers can't predict their movements because they're not following any logical pattern." The alien flagship. Amy Clark had successfully penetrated the outer hull and was making her way through the ship's corridors. The interior was unlike anything she had ever seen. The walls seemed to pulse with energy, and the air itself felt charged with electricity. She encountered her first Zephyrian guard near the computer core. The alien was tall and thin, with skin that looked like polished metal. It carried a weapon that hummed with deadly energy. Amy did something that no military manual would have recommended. She threw her helmet at the guard and ran in the opposite direction. The Zephyrian, programmed to respond to direct threats, followed her instead of raising an alarm. She led the guard on a chase through the ship's maintenance tunnels, using her smaller size to stay ahead of the larger alien. Finally, she managed to lose the guard in a maze of pipes and electrical conduits. Back in the corridors, Amy found what she was looking for. The main computer core was a massive room filled with crystalline structures that pulsed with light. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. She pulled out Dr. Hayes' device and connected it to what looked like a main data port. Toy-like appearance of the device made it invisible to the ship's security systems, which were designed to detect sophisticated cyber weapons. The virus began to spread through the Zephyrian network immediately. It didn't try to destroy the alien computers. Instead, it introduced chaos and randomness into their logical systems. Suddenly, weapons began targeting friendly ships. Navigation systems plotted courses into asteroids, and communication arrays started broadcasting embarrassing personal messages. "Admiral, we're experiencing system malfunctions throughout the fleet," reported the tactical officer, his voice filled with panic. "What kind of malfunctions?" Keth 7 demanded. "Everything, sir. Weapons, navigation, communications. Our computers are acting like they're drunk." On the bridge of the human destroyer Valiant, Captain Miranda Lee watched the alien fleet begin to fall apart. Ships that had been in perfect formation were now colliding with each other. Weapons that had been precisely aimed were now firing randomly into space. "Now we attack," she ordered. "All ships implement chaos protocols." The chaos protocols were perhaps the strangest military tactic ever devised. Instead of following logical attack patterns, the human ships began to move in ways that made no sense. They flew backwards, spun in circles, and changed direction without warning. Lieutenant Peter Davis, the Valiant's navigator, plotted a course that appeared to be a retreat, but actually positioned the ship for a devastating surprise attack. The Zephyrian computers, already confused by the virus, couldn't process the illogical human movements. "Target their flagship," Captain Lee ordered. "All weapons, fire." The human ships concentrated their fire on the alien flagship just as its systems were completely overwhelmed by the virus. The combination of cyber warfare and unconventional tactics was proving devastatingly effective. Fleet. Admiral Keth 7 felt his perfect formation falling apart around him. His ships were firing on each other. Their navigation systems were sending them into collisions, and the human attacks were coming from directions that his computers said were impossible. How are they doing this? He demanded of his bridge crew. "Don't know, sir," replied his tactical officer. "Their tactics make no sense. Our computers can't predict their movements because they're not following any logical pattern." For the first time in his long career, Keth 7 felt something that other species had felt when facing the Zephyrian Empire. He felt fear. The tide of battle was turning, and the hunters were becoming the hunted. Fleet Admiral Keth 7 watched his perfect fleet tear itself apart in ways that should have been impossible. His flagship's weapons were firing at his own ships. The navigation systems were plotting courses directly into asteroids, and the communication arrays were broadcasting what appeared to be love songs in 17 different languages. "Status report," he demanded from his bridge crew. "Sir, we've lost contact with 4 ships," reported his communications officer. 3 more have collided with each other, and the rest are experiencing random system failures. How is this possible? Our technology is superior to theirs in every way. "We don't know, Admiral. The humans appear to be using some kind of weapon that attacks our computer systems, but our sensors can't detect it." What Keth 7 didn't understand was that the humans weren't fighting with superior technology. We're fighting with superior thinking Dr. Hayes' virus was spreading through the Zifrian network like a disease. But it wasn't destroying their systems. Instead, it was teaching them to think like humans, chaotically and unpredictably. Major Tony Russell led a boarding party onto one of the disabled Ziforian vessels. His team consisted of soldiers who had been specially trained for this mission, including Sergeant Kelly White and Corporal Frank Moore. They entered the alien ship through a hole that had been cut by one of the human cargo ships. Remember? Tony told his team, "These aliens are used to fighting enemies who follow military rules. We're going to do everything wrong on purpose." The interior of the Zephyrian ship was a maze of corridors that seemed to glow with their own light. Walls were smooth and curved, unlike anything on human ships. Everything was designed for efficiency and logic. The first alien they encountered was a tall, thin creature with metallic skin and eyes that glowed like stars. It carried a weapon that looked like it could cut through steel. The alien raised its weapon and prepared to fire in a textbook military manner. Sergeant Kelly White did something that no military manual would have recommended. She threw her backpack at the alien and then hid behind a corner. The alien, programmed to respond to direct threats, followed the backpack, instead of staying in position to guard the corridor. While the alien was distracted, Corporal Moore snuck up behind it and used a stun device that had been built from modified civilian electronics. The alien collapsed, completely confused by tactics that made no logical sense. "This is easier than I expected," Kelly said. "Don't get overconfident," Tony warned. "They'll adapt eventually." But that was the problem for the Zephyrians. Their entire military doctrine was based on logical, predictable patterns. They'd conquered dozens of worlds using the same tactics, and those tactics had always worked. Now, they were facing an enemy that didn't follow any rules they understood: Captain Miranda Lee's ship. The Valiant was dancing through space like a butterfly avoiding a net. Her navigator, Lieutenant Peter Davis, was plotting courses that looked like the work of a madman. They would charge directly at an alien ship, then suddenly veer away at the last second. They would appear to retreat, then attack from an unexpected angle. "Their targeting computers can't keep up with us," Peter reported. "They're designed to predict logical movement patterns." "Then let's be as illogical as possible," Miranda replied. "All ships implement Pattern Chaos 7. Pattern Chaos 7 was one of the strangest military maneuvers ever devised. The human ships began to move in formations that spelled out words in space. They wrote hello and goodbye, and even nice try with their flight patterns. The Zephyrian computers tried to analyze these movements for tactical significance, but there was none. The humans were literally writing insults in space while fighting a battle for the survival of their species. Communications specialist Rachel Thompson was working at a computer terminal that had been built from parts salvaged from a children's. Arcada's her job was to hack into the alien command network, and she was succeeding beyond anyone's wildest dreams. "I'm in," she announced to her team. "Their security systems are incredible, but they're not designed to stop someone using a gaming console." The alien computers had defenses against every known form of cyber attack. They could stop military viruses, block government hackers, and defeat artificial intelligence systems. But they had no idea how to deal with a 12-year-old's video, a game that had been modified with military encryption through this unlikely backdoor. Rachel gained access to the Zephyrian tactical database. What she found there made her blood run cold. "What did you find?" Steve replied from the command center. "Information about the Zephyrian Empire. They've conquered 47 worlds, sir, or 47 different species, all destroyed or enslaved. Any survivors? But they're all slaves now, and sir, there's something else. The Empire hasn't faced a real military challenge in over 300 years. They're not prepared for a fight." Steve felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean?" "Their entire military doctrine is based on intimidation and overwhelming force. They've never had to adapt to new tactics because their old tactics always worked. Until now, this information was immediately transmitted to every human ship in the battle. The knowledge that they were not just fighting for Earth, but potentially for dozens of other enslaved species, gave the human forces new determination. The battle reached a turning point when the alien flagship began to lose main power. Amy Clark's virus had spread so thoroughly through their systems that basic functions were failing. The massive ship that had seemed invincible just hours before was now drifting helplessly in space. "This is our chance," announced Captain Lee. "Over the fleet communication system, all ships, concentrate fire on the flagship, the human fleet, consisting of everything from military destroyers to modified garbage trucks. Focus their weapons on the alien command ship." The Zephyrians tried to defend themselves, but their weapons were firing randomly and their shields were flickering on and off. Inside the flagship, Fleet Admiral Keth 7 was experiencing something that no Zephyrian commander had felt in centuries. The fear of defeat. His perfect fleet was being destroyed by creatures that he had considered barely more advanced than animals. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian High Command," reported his communications officer. "Put it through." The cold voice of Supreme Commander Vex 9 filled the bridge. "Admiral Ket 7, report your status." "We are under attack, Supreme Commander. The humans are using tactics that we have never encountered before. Impossible. Are primitive creatures with basic technology. With respect, sir, their technology may be basic, but their thinking is not. They're fighting us in ways that our computers cannot predict or counter." There was a long pause before Vex 9 replied, "You are the most experienced fleet commander in the Empire. How can you be defeated by primitives? We're fighting something completely different. These humans don't think like any species we've encountered. They're unpredictable, chaotic, and they seem to enjoy breaking rules." Another pause. "Can you complete the mission?" Keth 7 looked around his bridge, which was filled with sparks and smoke from failing systems. Half of his fleet was destroyed or disabled, and the other half was firing on each other, due to the virus in their computers. "No, sir, I don't think we can." "Then withdraw immediately. We cannot afford to lose an entire fleet to these creatures. Sir, if we withdraw, they will know that they defeated us. Other species might rebel against the Empire. It's better to have rebellions than to have no fleets left to fight them. Get out of there, Admiral, now." But as Keth 7 gave the order to retreat, he discovered that the human virus had infected even his retreat protocols. His ships were trying to flee, but their navigation systems were sending them in circles. The humans had trapped them in their own technological superiority. Major Russell and his boarding party had reached the alien ship's bridge. They burst through the doors to find themselves facing a dozen Zephyrian warriors, all armed with advanced weapons. "Surrender, humans," commanded the alien captain. "You cannot defeat us all." Tony looked at his small team, then at the dozen armed aliens. In any logical military situation, they should have surrendered immediately. Instead, he smiled. "You're right," he said. "We can't defeat you all, but we don't have to." He pulled out a device that looked like a remote control for a television and pressed a button. Throughout the ship, the lights began to flicker, and the gravity system started to malfunction. "What have you done?" demanded the alien captain. "We've introduced chaos into your perfect system," Tony replied as he and his team began to float. "In the reduced gravity, chaos is something we humans are very good at." The tide of battle had turned completely. One that refuses to follow the rules? The final battle began when Commander Joe Martinez led a desperate assault on the alien flagship. His mixed force of soldiers and civilians included Navy SEAL Kevin Taylor, engineer Laura Wilson, and dozens of volunteers who had never fired a weapon in space combat before. "Remember," Joe told his team as they prepared to board the massive Zephyrian ship, "we're not trying to fight fair. We're trying to win." The boarding pods attached to the alien hull with loud metallic clangs. Humans cut through the ship's armor using tools that looked like they belonged in a construction site rather than a space battle. Welding torches, power drills, and even crowbars were used to break into the most advanced warship in the Zephyrian fleet. Inside the ship, the humans found themselves in a maze of corridors that pulsed with alien energy. The walls were smooth and curved, designed for beings who thought in logical patterns. But the humans brought chaos into this ordered environment. Laura Wilson, who had been a civilian engineer just days before, used her knowledge of building systems to turn the ship's own infrastructure against its crew. She reversed the airflow in the ventilation system, turned off the lights in strategic areas, and even managed to make the ship's food dispensers spray hot liquid instead of meals. "This is insane," she said to herself as she worked. "I'm fighting aliens with a wrench and a flashlight." But her improvised sabotage was more effective than any military weapon. Zephyrians had never encountered an enemy who would attack their life support systems using civilian tools. Their training had prepared them for energy, weapons, and explosive devices, not for someone who would shut off their air conditioning in the middle of a battle. Fleet Admiral Keth 7 found himself trapped in his own command center, surrounded by humans who seemed to treat warfare as a creative exercise. His bridge crew was trying to fight back, but their weapons were malfunctioning due to the virus that had infected their systems. "You cannot win," he told Commander Martinez. "Even if you defeat this fleet, the Empire will send more ships, hundreds of them." "Maybe," Joe replied, as he and his team advanced through the smoke-filled bridge, "but they'll have to find us first." Kevin Taylor, the Navy SEAL, was using tactics that would have been considered impossible by military standards. He was fighting Zephyrian warriors using fire extinguishers as weapons, turning the ship's own emergency systems against its crew, and even using cleaning supplies to create slip hazards for the enemy. "This is the weirdest battle I've ever been in," he said as he slid across the floor on a puddle of alien soap. Firing his weapon at the confused Zephyrians, the aliens tried to adapt to these strange tactics. But their military training had never prepared them for an enemy who would use janitor supplies as weapons. They were programmed to respond to specific threats, not to someone who would spray them with foam from a fire extinguisher and then attack them with a mop. On the bridge, Fleet Admiral Keth 7 made his final transmission to the Zephyrian Empire. His message was broadcast across the galaxy, reaching every world that had been conquered by the Empire. "Supreme Commander Vexenine, this is Admiral Keth 7. My fleet has been defeated by the humans of Earth. These creatures are unlike anything we have encountered before. They do not fight with logic or follow predictable patterns. They are dangerous in ways that our military doctrine cannot address." The transmission was interrupted by static as the ship's communication systems began to fail. Keth 7 continued his message, knowing it might be his last. "The humans have shown that our empire is not invincible. They have proven that superior technology can be defeated by superior thinking. Other species will learn of this defeat, and they will rebel against our rule. The age of Zephyrian dominance is ending." The message ended as the flagship's main power systems finally collapsed. The massive ship that had seemed invincible just hours before was now a drifting hulk in space. Meanwhile, the last intact Zephyrian vessel was trying to escape to warn the Empire about the human threat. Captain Sandra Rogers and her crew aboard the modified freighter Liberty had been waiting for exactly this moment. "They're trying to run," announced her navigation officer. "Should we pursue?" "No," Sandra replied with a smile. "We're going to. Let them come to us." The Liberty had been disguised to look like space debris, complete with fake damage and a false distress signal. The escaping Zephyrian ship detected the Liberty's electronic signature, but dismissed it as wreckage from the battle. "They think we're just floating junk," Sandra told her crew. "Let's show them how wrong they are." The alien ship moved closer to investigate what appeared to be a damaged human vessel. It was a fatal mistake. The Liberty's concealed weapons activated, and the last Zephyrian ship was destroyed before it could send a warning to the Empire. "That's the last of them," Sandra announced. "No one's going home to tell the Empire what happened here." In the aftermath of the battle, Dr. Marcus Thompson led a team of scientists in studying the captured Zephyrian technology. But the real treasure wasn't the alien machines. It was the information in their computers. "This is incredible," Marcus told President Carter during the post-battle briefing. "Their databases contain the locations of every world they've conquered, every species they've enslaved, and every weakness in their military structure." "How many species are we talking about?" President Carter asked. 47 different civilizations, spread across 12 sectors of the galaxy. All of them are under Zephyrian rule, and all of them are potential allies if we can help them fight back. The captured alien communications equipment was already detecting signs of rebellion across the Empire. News of the Zephyrian defeat was spreading through underground networks, carried by species that had been waiting for any sign that their oppressors could be beaten. Admiral Harrison studied the star charts that showed the vast extent of the Zephyrian Empire. "We're going to need a plan," he said. "If we're going to help these species fight back, we need to do it smart." "What do you suggest?" asked President Carter. "We teach them what we learned. That superior technology can be defeated by superior thinking. That chaos and creativity are weapons that can't be countered by logic and programming." Dr. Foster had been analyzing the alien technology and had reached an important conclusion. "The Zephyrians aren't evil," she announced to the research team. "They're just limited. Their entire civilization is based on logical thinking and predictable patterns. They literally cannot imagine doing things differently." "What does that mean for us?" asked Rick Barnes. "It means we have an advantage that they can never overcome. We can adapt, improvise, and find solutions that they would never think of. As long as we keep thinking like humans, we'll always be one step ahead of them." President Carter stood before the United Nations to address the world about humanity's victory. But her speech wasn't about conquest or revenge. It was about something much more important. "Today, we didn't just defend Earth," she said. "We proved that freedom and creativity are more powerful than oppression and conformity. We showed that no empire, no matter how advanced, can suppress the spirit of intelligent beings who refuse to accept defeat." She activated a holographic display that showed the galaxy with dozens of star systems marked in red. "These are the worlds that are under Zephyrian rule. These are the species that need our help. And these are the people who are already fighting back because they know that if humans can defeat the Empire, so can they." The final scene showed Admiral Harrison and Dr. Martinez in the Deep Space Monitoring Station, listening to communications from across the galaxy. The airwaves were filled with messages from species that had been silent for centuries, now speaking openly about rebellion and freedom. "It's starting," Harrison said as he watched the communication displays light up with signals from distant worlds. "They're not afraid anymore." "What happens now?" Martinez asked. "Now we help them," Harrison replied. "We teach them that the most powerful weapon in the universe isn't technology or firepower. It's the refusal to give up, the willingness to try something new, and the courage to fight for what's right." On planets throughout the galaxy, species that had lived under Zephyrian rule for generations were beginning to remember what freedom meant. They were learning that sometimes the greatest victory comes not from being the strongest, but from being the most determined to never surrender. The scout fleet that had been sent to conquer Earth was gone, but its defeat had started something much more important than a single battle. It had started a revolution that would change the galaxy forever. And it all began because humanity refused to give up, refused to follow the rules, and refused to accept that superior technology automatically meant superior thinking. The age of the Zephyrian Empire was ending, and the age of galactic freedom was just beginning.